Welcome to We Are the People Network with Monica and Natalie on Unbreakable. When parents send their kids to school, they want to be able to trust that their kids are being educated, not indoctrinated. But as we pointed out on our last episode, our kids' classrooms have become more politicized than ever. And thanks to students taking videos or pictures or audio taken with their phones, parents have been able to see and hear with our own eyes and ears what students are experiencing firsthand in the classroom. This fall, students are seeing crackdowns on the use of cell phones like never before, with some schools banning them completely. Politicians and educators are saying it's for the kids' own mental health and safety, but there are more sides of this story than they are telling you. This is Monica and Natalie, and today on Unbreakable, we are shedding light on cell phone bans in the schools. So, Monica, cell phones, they say, are a distraction to the learning environment. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I think most parents would agree to that. And, what are the people saying that are proponing banning cell phones, and why are they justifying it? And sure, cell phones are a distraction without a doubt. I mean, we every parent has seen that with their own kids. But, there's a lot more to it than I think most people realize. So what are people saying? Why do we need to ban cell phones in the classroom? One of the reasons is that kids have too much screen time. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. The research for decades has said now that too much screen time is bad for kids, and I completely agree. I think every parent would. Any parent that has had kids on cell phones or computers knows that to pull them away from it is to break down of sorts, and not always pretty. And it doesn't really matter what they are on when they are on the computer, whether it's a game, an online game, or a learning app, whatever it is. Kids seem to be hardwired to be addicted to tech itself.
Okay, sure. So if kids being in front of the little screens at school is a problem, then why isn't anybody really talking about the big screens at school, the Chromebooks, right? And so we'll talk about Chromebooks a little bit more later on here, but it's really key to this whole issue, I think.
Right. If the small screens are a distraction to learning, the big screens are too. They would say that's not the case because that's where all of the ed tech curriculum is, but the big screens have the same access to all of the dangerous things that the small screens have, and we've seen children be accessed by strangers through the state issued Chromebooks. As far as this distraction idea goes, kids have always had distraction during their school day. Whether it's daydreaming or writing notes to each other, like in the old days, when you're passing notes. It's the same as texting now for kids, doodling.
Right.
There's all kinds of things. And if we want to remove distraction in the classroom, then there are more things we should be looking at than just cell phone use, because, kids are on sensory overload right now in the classrooms. They're trying to make the classrooms more welcoming and inclusive. And by doing that, they're filling them with these bright colored, posters and flags and all kinds of, propaganda and sexualized books, all kinds of just things that are distracting and to the learning environment and create a hostile learning environment. But, why are we not talking about those?
Right. Cell phones are a distraction, but they're not the only distraction. And like you mentioned, kids have been distracted historically at the schools. Einstein was thought to be an idiot by his teachers because he was looking out the window and daydreaming.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. So maybe another reason they want to ban cell phones is because they say, well, cell phones, can be a distraction because of kids communicating with others. But a lot of times parents give their kids a cell phone because they want to be communicating with their kid at school. I almost feel like it's kind of like you're right as a parent, wouldn't you say, to be able to be in touch with your kid and not have that communication be mediated by the school?
Right. So if without a cell phone, the child was dependent on the teacher letting them go to the office and call.
Yes.
If something's happening in the classroom that the teacher doesn't want Johnny to tell his mom, is the teacher really going to let Johnny leave to go and call mom? So cell phones have been a great blessing in that regard because they've created a window, an open window to what's happening in the classroom so that mom and dad can see or at least be made aware if something's happening. You know, there's a double-edged sword for cell phones, obviously, because kids do other things on them as well. But that comes down to the parent. If the parent wants, like you said, the parent wants the child to have a phone, at school, there's a reason.
Yeah.
If parents didn't want their child to have a phone, then that's the parent's prerogative to take that phone away. But, you know, if I had a child in school right now, I would want my child to have a way of contacting me directly in a way that the school couldn't necessarily see what they were saying to me, because I don't want the state inserting itself between me and my child.
Sure. Yeah. Same. I feel the same way. Another reason people will say that we need to ban cell phones in schools is because social media is bad for mental health, and these kids use their phones to access social media. And we agree, you know, social media is not the best for kids. However,
there's always this double standard
in
schools, because the schools often want kids to download apps on their phone for use in the classroom for specific purposes. Often those apps come with consent, that kids are consenting to these privacy agreements on the apps, which they're not adults. They shouldn't be consenting. But nevertheless, when it's the school's prerogative to have them on the app, they will allow the child to download that app. They can do that on on the state-issued devices also. But here you've got schools asking kids to download or get on social media for school.
For school, right?
And yet saying that it's bad for them at the same time. I mean, you have examples from your child's experience in school.
Right. I had a son who was in student government, and I had kept him entirely off of getting onto social media. No Instagram, no Reddit, no anything else like that. No Facebook. And he became a student body officer, and suddenly he is required, as part of his duties as a student body officer, to be on Instagram. And Instagram's like, it's like a porn algorithm in so many ways, right? They just kind of feed, they figure out who you are, your profile, and then they feed you the stuff that they think you might be interested in. If you are a young teenage boy, you get fed a lot of stuff about young teenage girls.
Right. And then I've heard other examples where the school's trying to hold a spirit week or some fun event, and they have like a TikTok dance competition. Again, incentivizing students to go on cell phone for school-related activities and programs. So the double standard and the mixed messages that are coming from the education system or from our state legislature that, you know, social media is bad, but also we want you on social media for the purposes of the state education system. Which one is it? And all of this creates confusion instead of clarity, and makes it seem disingenuous when they start saying we have to get rid of cell phones and social media is bad. Right. Well, if it is, then let's be at least consistent.
Sure. So, you know, a child's social media use, I always regard it as a parent's responsibility, first and foremost. And that's our responsibility to regulate, not the state's, but the state is getting into it now. So schools have had policies regulating phones in classes for as long as cell phones have been around almost. Mm-hmm. So why do we suddenly have this push from the legislature and from the governor to ban cell phones in schools? So here we have this image. And as you can see the headline says, some Utah schools already ban phones. Lawmakers say it should be a statewide thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's super interesting, considering in 2023, we had a bill run for this purpose. But we'll get into that. It failed, but the urgency seems to be around three big reasons. The first one is to hide the indoctrination or the transformation of our education system from parents, right?
Yeah.
Because parents have been upset the last few years with everything that's been exposed, and a lot of that comes because of what has been captured by cell phones in the classrooms. And you can see lots of examples of that scrolling here on the side during our podcast. All of these things that we would not have known about happening in the schools had it not been for cell phones, since parents are rarely allowed in spite of laws that say parents are allowed in the school. But COVID was a big thing that shut parents out, and then we've just seen it kind of escalate from there as far as changing the culture of who's allowed in the school and who's allowed to see what's going on. So also it takes away the parents' window into the classroom, which again helps legislators not feel the heat so much and helps the system cover for what's happening so that they don't have to take the heat for it. To have students on a state-issued device instead of their phone allows the state to monopolize the tech and have the students on tech that can constrail them.
Right.
Constantly.
So that would be a second reason, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a second reason, because the state-issued device, has cameras on it. It collects massive amounts of data on the students every day. Everything they're doing is trackable. Unless they're off on the side on their phone doing stuff, the state doesn't have jurisdiction over the student's phone, and they want to be able to track everything. So also, and that third reason is it cuts the parents out of the picture if we have the kids on the Chrome devices where the parents can't necessarily monitor that as easily as their student's phone.
Right. Yeah, sure. And we'll get into all these areas. Let's talk right now about like the first area. So what is some of the indoctrination that we've seen happening in schools thanks to kids' cell phones? So you've probably seen some of these examples before. Some of them may be new to you, but if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in education in the state of Utah, some of these are kind of egregious examples. Let's first talk about a Clearfield High safety assembly. So Natalie, do you want to explain this?
Sure. You'll see a text here from a parent talking about her daughter's experience at the safety assembly. In this text, the daughter tells her mom that, this school was engaged in speech policing in this assembly, teaching the kids what they can and can't say about, racist comments about people. And they were told that whatever was talked about in the assembly, they would have to take a quiz on to show that they had learned what they were supposed to learn. And the school faculty during that time was running around the gym, making kids put away their phones and saying, no phones. And you can only imagine why they didn't want that out. When you look at the text and the context of it, that would not look good for the school, right? To say we're having these conversations with your kids and that we didn't ask you if we could have, and they're kind of sensitive subjects and kind of volatile or politically speaking, when everybody's been kind of sensitized to the race conversation, right? And kids are being told that they're racist when they're not, or many of them are not, and they're being treated as though they're bad simply because they're white. And that's obviously a problem. So
Yeah, it's absolutely a problem. I mean, it makes you wonder, why wouldn't the school want this assembly recorded? Again, it begs the question, is this something they're trying to keep kids from relating to parents and showing them what's actually being said? Something gets lost in translation when you just say, this happened at school. And sometimes the parents are like, are you serious? That really, truly happened? And so that brings us to our second example here, where there was a teacher down in Alpine School District, and she was a chemistry teacher, and she kind of went on this rant, this political rant, and that's a really nice way of putting it, but it was a bit unhinged. And she talks about Trump and how she hates Trump, and she gets all into that. And then she accuses the kids of not being vaccinated as being a threat to her. And then she calls the kids' parents stupid, and she says, you're smarter than them. And she, she was very hostile right? Towards
Yeah.
the kids who didn't support climate change or the LGBTQ agenda, which she was a proponent of. Let's just watch this video really quickly, because I think we kind of cut it down to just kind of the salient points, but they're bad. It's really bad when you watch it. It's like kind of horrifying as a parent. So let's watch it.
I hate Donald Trump. I'm going to say it. I don't care what y'all think. Trump sucks. He's a sexual predator. He's a literal moron. Go tattle on me to the freaking admin. They don't give a crap. This is my classroom, and if you guys are going to put me at risk, you're going to hear about it, because I have to be here. I don't have to be happy about the fact that there's kids coming in here with their variants that could possibly get me or my family sick. That's rude. And I'm not going to pretend like it's not. So don't ask me to. That's damn right. Most of y'all parents are dumber than you. I'm going to say that out loud. My parents are freaking dumb. Okay? And the minute I figured that out, the world opens up. You don't have to do everything your parents say, and you don't have to believe everything your parents believe, because most likely you're smarter than them. If you don't believe in climate change, get the hell out.
I'll be dead.
Okay? That's pathetic that you think that. You're the problem with the world if you think that. Okay? If you're a homophobe, get out. Thank you. Because I am the GSA faculty advisor. I love gay people. All LGBTQIA plus mother. If you don't like it, get out. If I hear you say a damn word against any of them, I will open a can. And I will make your life a living hell. And they know it. If you say shiz to any LGBTQ kid in the school, I will hear about it, and you will be in trouble.
Okay.
Wow. It's just, I remember the first time I heard that, and I was driving, and I literally had to pull over. My jaw was on the ground. I could not believe my ears.
Right.
That this was real, that this was happening. And I remember going and speaking somewhere and having a father approach me in tears and saying, my child was in that teacher's class, and she complained to me many times over about how bad that teacher was. And I never believed her until this video came out. And he was horrified. He felt horrible that as a parent, he hadn't done more to protect his daughter. He didn't believe it. He couldn't have believed it had he not seen and heard it with his own ears. And yet here it was. And apparently this teacher had been complained about for years, but the administration never felt to do anything but cover for her until this went viral. And then that teacher was let go. But it took a video going viral before the administration would do something about it.
And it's so unprofessional. It is just, it's off the charts unprofessional. I can't imagine going into any sort of work environment and speaking like that to people over whom you have a stewardship.
Right.
It was next level as far as I'm concerned. So that's probably one of the most egregious examples that we've seen, but it doesn't mean there aren't other examples. We just haven't seen those necessarily. But a student had the presence of mind to record it in the moment. Yeah. So we've got another example.
Okay. So Pleasant Grove, back to school whiteboard questions for kids to get to know each other. It's a clever way for kids to reveal their pronouns to the teacher by revealing them to their peers while the teacher is paying attention, and to reveal their activist leanings in an unofficial survey.
Yeah.
If these questions were asked on paper or on the screen as a formal survey, they would require parental consent to be legal. But this is the clever way that activist teachers can get around that. They're not asking the student. They're simply allowing the students to share with each other. And these are the prompts that are on the board. As you can see, they ask for the pronouns. They ask for what world problem they want to solve. And this happens all the time. We have lots of examples of this happening. Even when the state superintendent in 2021 was the first year that suddenly all the teachers were asking kids for their pronouns, and it created such a ruckus among parents that the state superintendent came out and said, "Oh, teachers can't be doing that. You can't be asking this kids' pronouns." She went public with that, but then, there's emails from her to an activist teacher who complained about that, who wanted to ask her kids' pronouns, and the state superintendent told her ways to do it cleverly so that she doesn't get in trouble with the law. And so here we have just more examples of how these things are happening and the clever ways they get around the law.
Right. Just because it is not a formal survey doesn't mean they're still surveying and keeping note of the information that the students are voluntarily providing. So
right. And again, we wouldn't have this had it not been for a student capturing that image with their cell phone.
Yeah, in the class. So another example is down in Springville. I believe it was an elementary, might have been a junior high school.
I think it was a fifth grader.
It was a fifth grader. Okay. And this daughter told her mom about an assignment where the class was asked by the teacher to write about eating bugs. In fact, they were asked to actually eat bugs.
For extra credit.
Yeah, for extra credit. Great. And, not what I would consider a proper assignment for kids. But they had to write an essay about why we all needed to eat bugs here in America. And the student went home and said, "Mom, we've got this crazy assignment." And so the mom said, "Well, go ask your teacher, and if you can, record it on your phone." Right. And so that's what the daughter did. And she
wanted to write about why meat is good.
Yes. But she wasn't given that option for the essay. And so the teacher told her there is only one answer. So we're going to watch, this made national news. We're just going to watch a few clips from the Fox News report on the student having to eat bugs. Let's see how it all went down.
A teacher at Spring Canyon Middle School in Utah asked her parents to write an essay, or her students to write an essay on why bugs are better for the environment than eating meat. Kids could get extra credit for eating the bugs. But what if a student wanted to take the opposite stance, that eating meat's okay? Sorry, that wasn't an option. Watch.
How we can't state our opinion that white Americans shouldn't be eating bugs?
Because we don't have any evidence to support it. But should we be eating bugs? Yeah, because we're killing the world by raising cows and animals. So there's only one right answer for this essay. And it's that Americans should be eating bugs. Everyone else in the world's eating them. It's healthy for the environment. And there's only one right answer.
Only one right ansure.
Right? And this is supposed to be an argumentative essay.
Right.
Where in our day, you would have both sides, right? You are a debate major, right? How does that normally go down?
It doesn't go down well. I mean, if you want kids to so-called critically think, to think analytically about issues, then you want them to be able to see both sides of an issue. And here, the student was told there is only one right side. And it's kind of disconcerting to see it coming right out of the teacher's mouth like that.
Right.
Yeah, just as so matter-of-factly. So these are just a handful of examples. We have seen many more. Don't have all the time to show them, but they're just as bad. Parents should be horrified that these things are going on in the classroom.
Yeah. And so now we have new legislation being proposed to ban phones in schools. Again, if the state controls what devices the kids are on, the state controls what the kids are learning, what they're doing. They're able to monitor any conversations the student has, whether with their peers, their teachers, their parents, if it has to go through the learning platform on the state-issued device. And so to have kids on Chromebooks instead of on their cell phones allows the state to increase its surveillance on students. So tell us again, just quickly, why are Chromebooks just as bad as cell phones?
Well, if you know anything about technology, and the Chromebooks have been around for a long time, it's just kind of like a mini laptop for the kids. They're just as harmful. They're just as addictive. It's still screen time. So, that's not a good thing. You can download apps onto these Chromebooks. There's still dangerous content that is accessible to students. I know my kids, when they were in the system, were asked all the time to go out to these different websites as a condition of completing their homework. So it's like, okay, go to YouTube and watch this video. So they'd go to YouTube and they'd watch a video. The video didn't necessarily need to be pornographic. It could be porn adjacent, not appropriate things within it, whether it's violence or just, sexual innuendo, you name it. But then, of course, if you go to YouTube, then you're looking on the sidebar and the app or, the platform feeds you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all these algorithms, suggestions of where you can go next as a student.
Right.
Yeah.
So plus you have the experience with your daughter being groomed on her state-issued device by a total stranger that still had access to her.
Yes. And, and that's the sad thing is a lot of kids, they don't recognize these grooming techniques if somebody's super, sophisticated. If they've done it before, they know how to talk to a kid without making them feel like they are being groomed. They love bomb them. They give them lots of compliments. Then they start kind of eliciting sympathy from the child, like, I need you to be my friend. And so that's what happened to my own daughter using her state-issued Chromebook.
Right.
Yeah.
And this happened after school hours, so at home, which a lot of the Chromebooks only have filters that work at the school. And even still, the kids know how to get around those at school. I've heard of teachers having to have certain kids sit at the back of the room by the teacher's desk so they could monitor them because the students were watching porn on their state-issued laptop. And so, or substitute teachers being told to babysit certain students that didn't know how to handle the Chromebook that was in front of them because they had behavioral addictions. Again, speaking to the fact that the Chromebooks are not any better as far as protecting kids from those things. But then they take the Chromebooks home, and a lot of times those filters that worked at school don't work at home. And the kids have every excuse now to say, I have to be on my Chromebook because I have homework, right? Whether or not that's the real reason they're on it or not, it provides a good excuse for kids to stay on that Chromebook. And again, the state owns all the data and can track everything the student's doing and learn an awful lot about a student. And if a student can become predictable, they can become controllable, especially with all of the ed tech, which we'll do a whole nother show on to show how all of the embedded assessments and algorithms and AI are learning everything they can about a student so that they can personalize that education or indoctrination for each student.
Right. So think about like a kid who's learning from a Chromebook, and what the Chromebook does is it gets between the student and the teacher. And so another negative effect of Chromebooks is that it reduces teachers to facilitators. And it usually ends up where the kid is learning directly from, who knows, strangers who've developed a curriculum that, you don't know. You're not really, it's not like when I was a teacher, if I taught something directly to a student that a parent disagreed with, I was on the hook for that. But it's not this case when you have kids who are learning from strangers through their Chromebooks.
Right. Well, and when Common Core was introduced, it brought in national standards, right, for education. And those national standards are national and global. And ed tech companies, in order to be used by schools, have to align to those. And so when the standards become infiltrated with this woke ideology through its either a discrete language in the standards or strategically ambiguous language, the effect is that all the ed tech is aligned to this woke agenda. And so, if you look at it in that way, the Chromebooks are especially dangerous because they're all the ed tech is geared towards that social and cultural, racial and sexual indoctrination.
Right. And what's interesting, what we're looking at right now is the proposed language bill language to regulate and ban these cell phones in the schools. And if you know anything about bills, the language can change. So this isn't hard and fast by any means. However, it tells you what they intend and where they intend the bill to go. And in the bill, it talks about, how, it's against the law, essentially, except as provided in subsection 3, a student may not use a student's cell phone, smartwatch, or emerging technology at a school during the day. That's an outright prohibition. And so it makes this act of a student who does use their cell phone, smartwatch, or emerging technology at school during the day. If they do that, they're in violation of state law. It's not just breaking a school rule. They are in violation of state law at this point. Unless an LEA, which is a local education agency, or as we commonly refer to them as districts, unless an LEA decides to establish some exceptions. And the LEA has to establish a policy for when it is okay. But again, it's like, okay, is it okay? Is it not? Is it only okay when they say you have to hop on social media for a class? But as a parent, I don't want them to hop on social media for a class.
Right? Well, when you create language for law that is, in one sentence, it's a hard line prohibition.
Yeah.
In the next sentence, it's saying, well, here's all the wiggle room that districts can put into their own policy that make it not an explicit prohibition. Yeah. So it's talking out of both sides. Yes. It adds confusion, not clarity. And it allows the law to be applied subjectively and selectively, which means it could be used to target certain students that the school just decides it wants to target because they're not going along with the program, or they're exposing what's going on in the classroom instead of, jumping through the hoops that the state wants them to jump through for their education, for their educational experience. So it's kind of interesting when you look at it that way. So now we have a state ban that is proposed that's allowing the state to cut parents out of the picture on their involvement with their kids. What does this look like for the families if we don't have that window into what's happening in the school? And why is the state going over parents' heads in order to govern this family's property and the children's property, right? This is something that the parents most likely purchased for their child, and now the state is asserting itself to take control over and make rules over that personal property.
Right. It's almost like the state kind of knows no bounds at this point when it comes to taking over the roles that families have traditionally fulfilled in their children's lives, making as a parent, I make the decisions for my kids, and yet I send them to school and suddenly the equation's been flipped, right?
Right. Your rules don't matter anymore.
No.
Now it's the state's rules that matter, and the state gets to govern you and your child instead of it, which is taking away parental rights. And so I think it's interesting because our legislature has given a lot of lip service to parental rights, and yet now they are looking at taking away those parental rights in order to solve this problem that they see as a problem within the schools, which there's some merit to that, but overall, until the state reins in their own issues, they should leave the kids' cell phones alone.
Right, or leave it in the hands of the parents. So let's go back and look at the history of this a little bit. So here we had Governor Cox, and Governor Cox's Office of Family. So he created this, government agency that is over families.
Right. Again, government inserting itself between the parent and the child and telling parents how to parent.
Right.
Never a good idea.
No, it's not. And so Cox and this Office of Family, they approach Representative Trevor Lee in 2022, I guess, because they wanted him to run a bill in 2023 to make students having cell phones in class illegal. It failed spectacularly. It was rejected overwhelmingly, not just by the right, but by the left as well. In fact, Representative Kira Birkeland, from Morgan, we don't always see eye to eye with her on some legislative issues, but we do agree with her here because she said that she was appreciative of the work on the bill. But as a parent, she takes responsibility for her children's cell phone use. And she has this direct quote that was in the Salt Lake Tribune. She said, "I feel like this is the heavy hand of government in a way that it's not meant to be."
Yeah.
So if it was true then, I think it's still true now, right?
Right. Well, it makes you wonder because because it failed in 2023, you wonder, why are they bringing it back? And why is the Tribune article saying that lawmakers are calling for this? What changed between 2023 and now to say, oh, suddenly we need this. We need it so bad, right? Have they changed? Has Representative Birkeland and others changed their tune? And if so, why?
Right.
Okay. So now you've got, in addition to that, Cox sent a letter after the first bill failed. Governor Cox, because this is one of his primary objectives for his administration, sent a letter to all the districts and schools throughout the state urging them to ban cell phones from the school. And then he wrote the state school board and informed them that he had sent this letter to all the schools and districts. So if you understand the proper role of government in Utah, according to the Utah Constitution, you know that the governor has no jurisdiction over education, that is given to the Utah State Board of Education and the local districts to govern that. And like you said earlier, we've had policies about cell phones since as early as cell phones started showing up in kids' hands at school, right? And so why haven't those been sufficient? Why are we now saying we have to create law?
And, another way where we are seeing that the state cell phone ban basically kind of cutting parents out of the picture is that if you were to do this, if it were to become law, children at that point, it would be illegal for them to have a direct lifeline to their parents during school for when they view it as an emergency. So what the school always determines an emergency is not what parents necessarily see an emergency as, and it's not necessarily what kids see an emergency as. I remember one time my daughter was opted out of taking the school surveys, right, the panorama surveys, and suddenly I received this text from her in a panic. Mom, they're making me take the survey. I thought you opted me out of the survey. Yes, I did. Excuse yourself, go down to the counseling center, do not take the survey. But, she was unsure. So what had happened is it didn't end up being the panorama survey that I had opted her out of. It ended up being what they called an academic survey, and yet it asked questions of the same nature that the panorama survey did. But
which is a non-academic survey.
Which is non-academic, exactly.
So they're mixing the two together.
Right. But the school called it an academic survey. No, she's totally safe to take the survey. It's okay. And I said, no, you're just basically getting around my wishes as a parent. And if my daughter hadn't been able to reach out to me in the moment, then she may have just said, well, I'll just take the survey because I don't know what else to do.
Right, especially when there's that power differential between the administrators or teachers and a student. Students don't have necessarily the luxury or the courage to reject when they're being told to do something. They're just, this is expected of me. I'm supposed to do what I'm told. And, thank heavens for another bill that we passed that allows students to refrain from participating when something violates their conscience or their religious belief or that of their parents.
Right. And, and there are other examples too, whether it is because what's happening in the classroom is a violation of conscience. We could have health concerns. A friend of mine in my neighborhood has a diabetic child. She was told by her son that, the son said, we had a substitute, and the substitute didn't know that I had permission to use the bathroom whenever I needed to. And so the substitute denied the son the right to use the bathroom as he had through his IEP. And so, he just felt uncertain in that moment, and if he has no way of contacting mom and to say, what should I do? And for mom to be able to call the school directly and say, please, inform whoever is working with my son that these are the conditions of his IEP. It's really important that kids be able to reach mom and dad when they feel like it's necessary.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. That particular example makes me think of other examples when, like, a girl may have an issue where she needs something from mom, and it's a maybe a female issue, and she doesn't want to talk to her male teacher or her female teacher for that matter,
right,
or the principal. It's embarrassing, and she wants to keep that private between her and her parent. Well, the schools talk a lot about protecting children's privacy, but usually it means keeping things private from the parent, whereas kids mostly want to be in touch with their parent about those private issues.
Right.
They don't want to tell the school about their private issues. They want to talk to mom or dad about those private issues. But that's being denied in this scenario if we take away the kids' access to their parents.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you do go to the office, that phone call is made in full listening range of everyone in the office. And they actually vet the students before, why do you want to call home? And then, you have a secretary, you have whatever kids are walking in and out of the office, assorted personnel. There's no privacy for these kids where, they deserve this privacy in situations like this of a sensitive nature.
Right. And for those that, there are parents that don't want their kids having cell phones at school, and that's perfectly understandable, because some kids just can't handle that cell phone. But those kids need to be able to still access mom and dad and keep things private between them and their parents. And so early on, I remember advising parents, to have like a keyword or something, if the student calls you from school and uses that word, that's your signal as a parent to understand that the child is in a predicament that they don't dare talk about in front of the office staff or teachers or whatnot. So that's just something to think about, that you kind of have a password or something that just you and your child know, so that the child's not left in a vulnerable position where they feel helpless, and they can let you know without saying it directly that there's a problem going on at school, and so that you as a parent can jump in and kind of figure out what's going on or come to the rescue if need be.
And not only that, but you look at so many situations where schools have to go into some sort of lockdown mode. And they change the terminology every year, but usually it's because, there's a perceived threat, physical threat to the students from whether within the school or outside of the school. And, I've had it before where my kids have called me from their classrooms to let me know, this is what's happening. They generally discourage that. They don't want kids to be calling home to mom, so mom doesn't get worried because the school's been locked down. Dad doesn't worry. But, as a parent, and when you understand how quickly a lot of these Like if you're talking a real threat, like a school shooting incident or something, things like this can happen in the blink of an eye. And usually, when we've seen the system fall to pieces on the outside, right, where it was, I believe in Uvalde, where you had parents who were coming to the school and pulling their kids out of the school because the law enforcement wasn't exactly intervening in the way that was expected by parents.
Right. That's a huge problem, and parents need to be able to get their kids, and kids need to be able to access their parents in those moments, because we do have systems that they're so micromanaged and controlled, and so much red tape that they have to jump through, that like in the Parkland, Florida school shooting case, the police officers waited outside for an hour while the active shooter was going on. They could hear it going on, but they were told not to go in. So we need, there needs to be some kind of access. And if cell phones are required to be locked in pouches, the kids won't have that access. And if the school, sometimes some people in the system are saying, well, in an emergency, kids could use their phones. Well, you don't always have that luxury if you're in lockdown and kids can't get to their phones because maybe they're hiding under the teacher's desk or whatnot. And so that's not really helpful when the kids need the phone now and they can't get to it.
Yeah.
So, and plus you've got, if the kids have their phones and they're all sending messages to their parents, that gets word out of what, different perspectives of what's happening in the moment. And I think the system really wants to be able to control the narrative in those situations in order to frame it, what's happening the way they want, instead of letting out extra details that could make their job messier and harder. But that also shine light on what was really going on. So those different perspectives are super helpful to put the whole picture together, and when you piece it all together. So again, we have, this is a real issue. I hope lots of people are talking about this because it is a complicated issue. But at the end of the day, we still have our Fourth Amendment rights and our right to personal property and our parental rights to decide how our children, if they should have phones or not, and they should be allowed to go by a parent's rules instead of the school's if the parent feels it important that the child go to school with a cell phone.
Right. And there's always the issue again, obviously if something is disrupting a classroom, if a child's use of a phone is disruptive, they're playing music out loud, they're watching a video out loud, they're doing something that is, it simply is a deterrent to learning. That's one exception, and we need to deal with that as those situations come. But to make it illegal as a general rule just doesn't work.
Right? We don't want to be criminalizing our kids.
No.
Or giving the system or schools reason to use a heavy hand.
Right.
Where it's not necessary.
All right. We'd like to wrap up, and special thanks to our sponsor, Sherry Jensen, for making our show possible. We're very grateful for her support to be able to get the word out to parents and to the public. And please subscribe to our channel on the We Are the People network. Our show is Unbreakable, and we're grateful to be able to bring it to you. Cell phones, in particular smartphones, have revolutionized how we communicate with each other, and that revolution has been a double-edged sword. Can this be problematic for students? Absolutely. But can cell phones also be a protection? Absolutely. But we get into slippery slope territory when we allow the state to make laws that set double standards on the use of tech, like cell phones. If overuse of tech in general is bad for children, then schools should be cracking down on their own tech addiction to Chromebooks first. And parents need to step up to the plate to protect their kids in their use of tech altogether in more ways than one.
So whether you have children in the public education system or you are homeschooling, you'll want to tune in to Unbreakable, where we talk about the latest trends in education that hit home. You won't want to miss it. Helping children and families find truth to become unbreakable, we're Monica and Natalie. See you next time.